Hello and welcome to the Futures Lab. So, last week we created our green shield, and this week we are going to create the projectiles that the green shield is supposed to protect us from. So that means creating these little arrows or spears. So first things first, let's create a new costume. In your project, head to your attack sprite and then go to your costumes tab. So you can create a new costume if you want. I'm going to duplicate our spear costume. So let's right click here, duplicate, and we'll call this costume Green Soul, because these attacks will only happen when we're actually in the Green Soul mode. Now this spear costume is actually a little bit big, so I'm going to shrink this down, and I'm also going to make some adjustments. I'm going to make it a bit shorter, and I'm going to squish down this arrow section here. And once you're done making some adjustments, we can even send this to the X0 and Y0, and then click the show button to see what size it is. I think that looks about right. They're about the same size as the heart. In fact, mine even could go just a little bit smaller. And once you're done making adjustments, let's head to the code. So we are going to create a new my block for our green soul attacks. We're going to click make a block, and we're going to call this Green Soul. All in capitals, so we know this is one of our attacks. Then let's add a space and a capital R. This is going to be for our input, which is repeat. Then add a label, and we'll call this W for another input, that is wait. You can add in more inputs than this if you want, and I'll explain those as we go. But for now, I'm happy with just being able to change the repeat and the wait. When you're done, press OK. Now with all the code that we've added, we've got quite a few things we need to do at the beginning of any new attack. So I'm actually going to copy what's underneath define scatter and bring that over, but we'll go through it line by line, so you can start from fresh if you like and just bring this code over. First of all, we need to set the color, and we want the color always to be white, because when we're in the green soul mode, we can't move, so there's no real point in changing it to orange or blue attacks. Next, we need to set the power of the attack. I think 3 damage is quite good. Then we need to set the movement type to straight. Let's set the fade in to no, but you can change this to yes if you want. Now we have this set projectile spawn rate variable. For now, I'm actually not going to keep that. I don't think we'll need that for the way we're setting up green soul attacks. Then we need to switch the costume to the green soul costume. And we need to make sure that we are going to the front layer. And there is one more variable we need to change. Let's set the soul variable to green. Now we need to think about how we're going to create these green soul attacks. These arrows can spawn from one of 4 directions: left, right, up, and down. Now we have created attacks before that have used random numbers to generate which side we start on, and then we put in the coordinates manually for each of the 4 possibilities. But I think there's an easier way. So let's put in a repeat block. And we're going to repeat this with our repeat input number of times. Let's start the attack in the middle of the screen where we know the green heart will be. So let's say go to X0, Y0, and let's point in direction 90, the default direction. Then we can point our attack sprite in the direction we want the arrows to come from. So let's get out a repeat. And inside this repeat, put a pick random 1 to 4. Then we just need to get out a turn 90 degrees. And each time we create one of these arrows, it will turn a number of times, 1 to 4 times, and that's our 1 to 4 different directions. And now we've got this nice, easy way of creating a random direction for our arrows to come from. But now what we need to do is spawn the clone. Now the attack right now is pointing at the direction we want the arrows to come from. So let's move it forwards and then turn it around to face back at the starting point, the center of the screen, where the green heart shall be. Let's get out a move 10 steps and then a turn 180 degrees. Now with our move block, we could say move 240 steps. That way, When it goes from the left and the right, it always goes to the very edge of the screen and spawns the attacks pointing back inwards. However, if we were to do that, then the attacks on the top and the bottom are significantly closer to the center, and it can actually make the attacks kind of unfair, having some of them closer than others. It can mess up your timing, and it will also mess up some of the code we have later. So I'm going to say move 180 degrees. That's the maximum we can go up and down, so that's how far we'll go left and right as well. Now we need to actually create our clone. And we also need to wait until we create the next clone. And we'll wait, let's say, 0.4 seconds. If you want the gap between the arrows to be longer, just change this to a higher number, maybe 0.8 seconds or 1 whole second. And if you want the game to be a bit harder, make this a smaller number, like 0.2 seconds. If you wanted, you could also tie this number into an input. And I recommend that you call this input the spawn rate input. But I'm happy at just 0.4 seconds as the rapidness of my arrows spawning. So the only thing we need now is a wait for our wait input number of seconds. I called this input W. I'm going to fix that now. We'll call this input wait. And so at the end, we're going to wait for wait seconds. And when you create green soul attacks, you can leave this blank if you want, but it is kind of useful if you ever want a gap in your attacks. Okay, I think it's time to give this a test. So look around for your if mode equals evade loop. Once you've found it, just pull out all of your attacks and let's put in a green soul, and we'll repeat the green soul attack 40 times. Okay, let's see what that looks like, shall we? Okay, let's see if we switch across to the green soul properly. Oh, we do. That's good. Excellent. And we've got all of the arrows coming from various directions. They're coming from above, from below, from left, and from right. Obviously, our shield doesn't work yet, but we can work on that. Okay, head back to your green soul code. Now let's move this define green soul. Let's move this so that it's close to our collision code. Okay, now that we've got these next to each other, we can tackle our next problem. Have a look at these arrows. Do you notice anything about their color? Now you might not have noticed this before, but most of the arrows are a very light blue, but one of them is always red, and the red one changes. It's always the one that's closest to the heart, so that you as the player can have a look for the red arrow and then point your shield at it. So let's see if we can code something similar into our green soul attacks. Okay, so first thing that we'll need to do is update the costumes. So head to your costumes tab, look for your green soul attack, and then we'll rename this first green soul as green soul blue. Select the entire arrow and let's give it an outline. I think 2 pixels is good, and we'll make this outline white, and then we'll make the fill color a very pale blue. Okay, that looks pretty good. Now let's duplicate our green soul blue. Let's rename the new costume as green soul red. And then all we need to do is select the arrow and change it into a red fill. Okay, once we've done that, let's head back to the code. Now we're going to have to create some code that allows all the clones of these arrows to figure out who is the closest to the green soul. Now we could try and do this by measuring the distance, but there's a nice, easier way to figure this out. We can use a list, and the attacks can keep track of who is first in that list. So we first need to figure out a way for all these attack clones to have something unique that identifies them. We're going to have a number, and it just so happens that we have a variable that will do this job. We have the counter variable. So get out a set counter variable to 0 and put it here. And then let's pull this create clone of myself up above the weight, and just above that, let's pull out a change counter variable by 1. Now we've used this counter variable before to keep track of our Asgore swipes, but it's also going to work as a unique identifier, and that's because when we made it for this sprite only. And what that means is that each time we pass on this variable to one of the clones, it will keep that unique from all of the other clones. So let's start adding these to our list and you'll see what I mean. We're going to need to create a new list. So click on Make a List. We need to make sure that this is for all sprites, and we're going to call this list Green Soul Projectiles. Then press OK, and we want to get out Add Thing to List and put it right underneath the counter. We want to add our counter variable to our Green Soul Projectiles list. Let's give that a test and see what it looks like. Okay, so as these are being created, they are being added to this list, and each of these clones will have its own individual number that is unique to it. So now you'll see why I brought us to our define collision code. We're actually going to put some code underneath define collision. Now, for the moment, let's actually drag all the code off. We're going to put this code underneath here, and then once we're done, we're going to put this code back on the bottom of it. So first thing, all the code that we're about to put in here should only happen if we're in the green soul mode. So I'm just going to duplicate this, get rid of the rest of it. We need an if soul equals green. Then inside here, we need to put in an if then else. Now this is the code that's going to switch the costume between the blue arrow and the red arrow. So what we need to do is see if the counter variable is the first item in our green soul projectiles list. So let's get out an equals operator, then get out a counter variable, and then we need this, item 1 of list. Put that here, but make sure that you change the list to the green soul projectiles list. And now each individual clone of an arrow will be able to ask itself, if my number, my counter number, is the first in the list, then I need to be the red arrow. So let's get out a switch costume to green soul red. Otherwise, if I'm not first in the list, I need to be green soul blue. But now we need to make sure that we update this list, and that when the attacks delete themselves, they also delete themselves off the list. So underneath our code that changes the costume, we need to put in a if touching heart. And if we have touched the heart, we need to delete item 1 off the list. So get out delete 1 of list, make sure we change it to green soul projectiles, and then get out a delete this clone. So now this should update the list, but there is one more thing we need to do. We need to make sure that we empty out this list at the beginning of the game. So go looking for a when green flag clicked, and when you find one, right underneath, you need to put delete all of list, and make sure that we're deleting the green soul projectiles list. Okay, time to give it another test. So now you can see our list is being updated. The arrows delete themselves off the list when they delete the clone, and when they are created, they add themselves onto the list. And these arrows know if they are front in line because they'll be at the top of the list, and they make sure that they are red if they are the closest to the green soul. It's working perfectly. Now head back to your define collision code. There is one thing that you might have noticed is not happening. The heart isn't taking damage anymore. So we need to fix that. And we already have this if touching heart, so we might as well do it here. So look down at the rest of your collision code and copy the very bottom where we've got broadcast screen shake, set heart invulnerable, and change player current HP. Let's drag this back up. Now, we need to put this here, but we need to make sure that the heart isn't invulnerable. It might not come up very often, but if you have very rapid fire attacks and you still want the invulnerability to work when the heart is flashing, let's get out an if then and put it around these 3 lines. And we want to check to make sure that the invulnerable variable, heart invulnerable, is less than 1. You could probably also use equal to 0, and they should work about the same. So once you've got all this together, we're going to take this whole if then and put it right underneath if touching heart. Okay, let's give that a test, shall we? Excellent. You can see we're losing health here, and we're getting that response where we've got the screen shake happening. Fantastic. So now we need to make sure that our green shield is working. So let's get out an if touching green shield, and that needs to go very specifically here. It needs to be nicely in line right underneath if touching heart. If this goes any lower or any higher, it won't work correctly. So then when we are touching the green shield, we need to make sure that the green shield is pointing in the correct direction. So let's get out an if then else. And the question that we're going to ask is the attack's direction, so get out your direction from your motion codes, and the direction of the green shield the same? So we need to get out this backdrop of stage, change stage into green shield, and change this into direction. Now drag this direction of green shield into here, and if these are exactly the same, then we need to delete the clone and delete from the list. So duplicate from this delete one of green soul projectiles and put it right here. However, the shield and the attack are not going to be exactly the same. They're actually going to be opposites. They're going to be pointing in opposite directions. But there's a nice easy way to fix that. Let's go to motion and get out a turn 180 degrees and put it right here. So first, the attack will, once it's moved forward and is touching the green shield, it will flip itself around, and then it will compare its direction with the direction of the green shield, and if they are the same, then it will delete itself. And if they are not the same, then it will turn again. Get out another turn 180 degrees, and because there's no weights in between these two turns, it will happen so fast you will never see it doing this turning. Okay, let's give it a test and see if it works. Okay, it's working with some of them, but not with all of them. There are times when I feel like it should block when it doesn't. Let's go and do a bit of an experiment, shall we? Let's have a look in our green shield sprite. Now remember, we've got these say direction right here and this say I'm free right here, which we used to fix some of the problems that we had last week. Let's get out this say direction. And let's get out this say I'm free. And let's put our say direction right here so that we'll see the direction once it's settled, hopefully. Okay, it's working a lot of the time, but sometimes, especially when we go up, we do end up with those very small numbers that can create problems for us. There is a way to cut down on this though. Now we fixed this problem last week by using rounding, and we can do the same thing here. Go into your attack and look for your direction of green shield right here, where we're comparing it to the direction, and let's just put a round on our direction of green shield. Might not be perfect, but it should make things a little bit better. Now the only thing left is to make it extra satisfying for the player and also make sure that they know when they have blocked an attack. One way to do this is, as you can see, we can change that blue shield line into a red line. And another thing that we can do is add in a sound effect. So back in your attack code right here, we can put in some of those satisfying effects. First, let's add in a sound. Go to the Sounds tab, click Choose a Sound. You can choose any one that you like, but I quite like one that's called Coin. Once you've selected the sound that you want, it should be here in your available sounds. And then we just need to go to the code, go to Sound, and get out Start Sound Coin and put it right here. Now we also need a way to tell the green shield to switch its costumes. So we'll just get out a broadcast and we'll make a new broadcast, a new message, and we'll call this Green Soul Shielded. Press OK. Now before we go, we should get this code that we pulled off, our if color Y and everything underneath it, and put it back on the bottom so all that code runs as normal. Once that's done, head to your green shield sprite. Now we shouldn't need this say direction anymore, so we can just pull that out like so, and then get out a when I receive green soul shielded. All we need to do is switch the costume to red, then switch the costume back to blue, and between those two things, put in a wait 0.1 seconds. Let's give it a test. And there you can see we've got this very responsive shield. We can hear this cool sound and see the blue line light up red every time we successfully block one. And if we don't, then we take the damage. Excellent, it's all working. And that's all the time we have this week. As always, you can subscribe and ring the bell to get notifications for what's happening in the next episode. Let me know in the comments what you would like me to do next, or if you need any help with your project. And aside from that, stay awesome, be cool to each other, and take care of yourselves. We'll see you next time, ninjas.